It's important to remember for all here that before the contract started, the city was processing 38,000 tons of leaf and yard waste at Trail Road. This was before the contract report. That cost in 2014 is about $16 a ton versus the approximate $104 a ton that ORGAWORLD charges program to process organics. Now, when we talk about peak leaf and yard waste, we're referring to the 2 5-week periods of higher than normal leaf and yard waste volumes in the spring and fall, where separate collection is in effect. City staff estimate that about 60% of available peak and yard waste is currently separately collected. That means that about 40% of peak leaf and yard waste is co-mingled. Since there is no saving related to the collection of this peak leaf and yard waste, it would have been beneficial to direct separately collected leaf and yard waste to Trail Road for processing, because it can be processed at a much lower cost of about $16 a ton versus the $104 a ton at ORGAWORLD. The possible cost savings related to processing this separately collected leaf and yard waste do not appear to have been factored into the business case. Yard waste that were processed at Trail Road were processed at a much lower cost. Discussing or contemplating including leaf and yard waste in the upcoming organic contract prior to the signing of the contract with ORGAWORLD, the impact of including those 38,000 tons that was going to ORGAWORLD and being processed at about $16 per ton amounts to an additional cost of about $3.35 million a year. Over the life of this 20-year contract, that would be $67 million in costs. This premium was not brought to the attention of the Council during the review and approval process. We found that, as we progressed through some of the other findings, we found that Environmental Services Department staff that were involved in the contracting process did not follow through with advice from the city's external legal counsel to include a ramp-up period in the contract. In our opinion, at the very least, they should have been included in the request for proposal. It was not. We also found that the Environmental Service Department staff involved in the contracting process did not accept the recommendation from supply management for the negotiation of a smaller processing facility once the bids have been received and assessed. The rationale for non-acceptance or for the non-consideration is not documented in the corporate records. Our auditors found that individuals identified as the point of contact could not provide the requested supporting documentation during the course of our audit. We found that there was ambiguous communication to Council. It was unclear that leaf and yard waste was to be included in the 100,000-ton threshold. The impression was given in communications with Council that the 100,000 tons was easily achievable, when our analysis indicates that only after 19 years would we achieve a 100,000 level of material, and that's only if leaf and yard waste is included. There was very little discussion of options, and the risks were not properly identified to Council. And when we talk about risks, we're talking about the risks of not achieving volume, the risks of some of the options around frequency collection, etc. So based on the contract that exists, from the beginning of the contract to 2013, there have been $4.7 million of unnecessary payments for the unutilized capacity. That's the difference between the material that was provided by the city and the 80,000-ton threshold that is in the contract. In addition, since that time, $3 million has been paid for processing separately collected leaf and yard waste at ORGAWORLD. To date, This means that almost $8 million was paid to ORGAWORLD that, in our opinion, did not need to be paid. ORGAWORLD proposal, ORGAWORLD indicated that they required leaf and yard material at an acceptable price. And it wasn't clear whether that was to be purchased by ORGAWORLD or if ORGAWORLD was to process that material at a lower price. But we were not able to find any documentation to support why this was not pursued by staff. During the request for proposal process, after the request proposal was issued and before it was before the closing date, the put or pay threshold was raised from 70,000 tons to 80,000 tons through a contract amendment. The financial impact of this put or pay threshold increase was about $3 million from the inception of the project to the end of 2013. The rationale for this increase, the potential cost of this increase, could not be found in city documentation. Had the city entered into a contract with the reasonable minimum put or pay threshold, there was no need to send the separately collected peat, leaf, and yard waste to ORGAWORLD for processing. We believe a further potential cost of $4.9 million based on 60% of peat yard waste between the years of 2014 and 2023. And the reason why we stopped at 2023 is because that threshold will actually need to be reached in 2023. The staff of Environmental Services would not have been in a position to know the true cost of the proposed contract as a critical piece of the necessary analysis to support the eventual decision to proceed with the source separated organics contract, because the determination of incremental trucking costs wasn't conducted until March of 2014, 4 years after the contract award. During the course of the contract with ORGAWORLD, they would occasionally raise concerns regarding the volume being delivered during spring and fall peak collections. Whenever the city was delivering quantities in excess of 320 tons a day, but less than the 400 tons per day of the contract, ORGAWORLD would raise concerns that the leaf and yard waste was not part of the SSO contract. That was the subject of the arbitration, and request that the city redirect this additional material to Trail Road. In our view, this could be indicative of a capacity issue facing ORGAWORLD. The contract binds ORGAWORLD to have a facility that could accept up to 335,000 tons. In our view, that facility does not have that capacity, and we're suggesting that staff follow up to examine whether or not the ORGAWORLD facility has the capacity as determined in the contract. The arbitration between ORGAWORLD and the city to determine the materials that could be included in the contract cost to the end of 2004 to the end of June 2014 about $1.7 million in external legal costs. This arbitration was initially expected to last a couple of weeks, a month. It actually was quite protracted, longer than anyone expected. But it's our view that these costs, because they included over 3 months of actual hearings for the commercial arbitration, had there been complete corporate records, and had the hearings lasted for a normal time period for a project of this nature, that the legal costs would have been significantly reduced, perhaps as much as $1 to $1.4 million less. This is as a result of the lack of corporate documentation to support the project. Well, there's no doubt that the marketplace has changed for the processing of source-separated organics. For example, the City of Ottawa has obtained a significantly better cost per ton in 2009. And if we were to apply that rate on the volumes that the City of Ottawa has, so be it a similar contract for the City of Ottawa, starting in 2016, we would see a saving of about $30 million. Now, we realize that, of course, we haven't included the costs of canceling the existing contract with ORGAWORLD. Legal Services would be the appropriate group to identify what those costs might be. And we also realize that currently there isn't a facility that is large enough to accept the volume the City of Ottawa had. But I think we would point out that at the time that the city started down the road pursuing their own source separated organics facility, there was no facility that could handle that volume at the time as well. So in conclusion, Mr. Mayor, recommend the documentation that one would expect to find within the city records for a project of this magnitude simply were not available for us to review. The analysis that should have been done for a project of this size was incomplete and confusing. Appropriate information was not provided to council. La délégation n'a pas fourni l'information appropriée au conseil. And in our view, this would be a good opportunity to examine early contract termination and assess other options, including a city-owned and operated facility. Of course, we would have to examine the impact and the cost of exercising the early termination clause and assess any other options. The bottom line, Mr. Mayor, is the City of Ottawa paid about $8 million to ORGAWORLD that it should not have had to pay. We cannot lose sight of the fact that this project was built on a weak foundation where the proper analysis that should have been done for a project of this size was not done by city staff. Thank you.